All right, talking your health, we're talking about how you can live longer. The average lifespan, by the way, for a Californian is 80. Joining us with some ways to push past that mark, if you so choose, is Dr. Sabrina Fabi. Dr. Fabi, great to see you.
Nice to see you, Jen.
All right, so what are researchers looking at when they study the centurions, the people who live past 100?
Well, there's always a fear that if you live longer, which many physicians are always trying to find ways to cure diseases, right? But there's always the fear that if you cure these diseases, perhaps the quality of life is not as great. But in fact, if you live longer and you've made it to maybe greater than 95 years of age, you tend to actually be healthier. You didn't get that old for no reason. And so researchers have been investigating specific genes associated with those that live until greater than 95, or centenarians or near centenarians, with those that don't. And they have found some pretty interesting gene patterns that may give us, some insight as to what genes we can increase expression in or block so that we can get to that age but have a great quality of life.
Okay, so that was kind of my next question, and maybe you're alluding to that with the genes, but I would think there would be some sort of common factors when it comes to having a longer lifespan.
Yes, and so there have been two studies going on, specifically in New England, on centenarians or near centenarians since 1994, and now this study has gone on to actually New Zealand as well as Australia. And what investigators are looking at is what these particular people have. And so they're looking specifically at Ashkenazi Jews, because this demographic tends to be very homogeneous in its genetic makeup, in that 40% of Americans that are Ashkenazi Jews can actually be traced back to actually 4 founding mothers. So their genetic makeup is very stable. It's in this population that we've actually identified ovarian cancer genes as well as breast cancer genes. So it's pretty consistent. And so they looked at this population, but specifically those that were living 95 and older, and found that they had particular genes that allowed them to live that long compared to those that were younger, anywhere between 56 and 70 years of age.
So then would it be safe to say that you can't really do anything to help yourself live longer? It's just a heredity thing and how your genes are in your DNA?
Not if medicine gets smart and they start expressing or making certain genes mimic the genes that we saw in these centenarians. So specific genes were those specifically in cholesterol. What we found was that in those that lived longer, they tended to have high good cholesterol, or HDL, and low bad cholesterol, or LDL. This correlated with lower cardiovascular disease, lower diabetes, lower hypertension. They also found other genetic traits that made them live longer. Specifically, if you had one gene, you could live on average 4 years longer. So if you maybe express that gene in me, perhaps I could live 4 years longer. And so I think it's really the future of medicine to be going towards more gene-directed therapy. And then one of the more interesting ones for me was my grandmother ended up living until she was 99 years of age.
Wow.
And she was very healthy, had no cognitive decline until 96, which was another thing that they actually found in this age group. And what they saw was that perhaps if we end up maybe decreasing cholesterol in some people, maybe we don't have the gene-directed therapy quite yet, but if we decrease cholesterol, or at least the bad cholesterol, increase the cholesterol, then perhaps we can have people live this long. But my grandmother was very short. So one gene that they found was that people that tended to be very short, it actually correlated with a longer longevity. So she was 4'8", and so maybe that's why she lived to almost 100 years of age.
Yeah.
I don't know. But there was a particular gene that correlated with both.
Interesting. Well, I've always heard red wine also decreases cholesterol.
That's one way to tell yourself that it's okay, right?
Dr. Fabi, always great to have the conversation. Thanks for being here.
Nice seeing you, Jen. Thank you for having me.